Will you pray with me as we prepare to hear from the word of the Lord? Father, you are really, really marvelous. We thank you for drawing us into worship today of you. There is no one of whom we can say they deserve all praise and honor and glory, but you do. So we just bless you today. Thanks for being our Father. Thank you for coming after us as we were running away. Thank you for people in our lives that pursue us. And thank you for the table you've prepared before us in the presence of our enemies. We bless you this day. Pray that this is an honor to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Of course, we're going to be looking at the 23rd Psalm today, so if you want to turn there, great. You might also turn to 2 Samuel chapter 9. I'll be reading from that in a little bit. Few people's lives have paralleled David's, king of Israel, fighting bears and lions in the wilderness to protect his father's sheep, for example, being anointed king while his predecessor remained firmly established on the throne, killing a giant much bigger than most WWE wrestlers while he was still a very young man, serving in the court of his predecessor who, due to insidious jealousy, kept trying to kill him, sharing one of the deepest, most loyal friendships in recorded history with the son of this same disturbed king, leading a merry band of pirates. Now that to me actually sounds like fun. Surrendering the opportunity to kill that same disturbed king as the king was going to the bathroom in a cave, stealing the wife of one of his most faithful warriors and then having that noble warrior killed, being run out of his own capital city by his maniacal son. That's pretty much what you call an average life, right? It's very apparent that David didn't live a safe, cloistered, calm life. He lived a promising, visceral, scandalous, powerful, humiliating, worshipful, murderous, courageous life. David didn't shrink from life's challenges and dangers. There was a fullness in him paralleled by few. In the end, he was considered a man after God's own heart. As often as he wandered off into self-indulgence, he would traipse repentantly back into his Father's graces. Perhaps exactly because of his frequent displacements from home, from kingdom, from friends, from royal court, and the returns that he made back to those places. He knew the great comfort and fullness of a glorious, albeit fragile, restoration. If you read the Psalms through, you find a lot of pain, a lot of questioning and wondering about God, a lot of broken dreams and failures. Many of the Psalms reveal a tormented heart. I would encourage you to read them. They're marvelous. They're the heart cry of broken people. Broken people who plead for rescue. That's why the question of, God, why have you forsaken me, Psalm 22, is so pointed and prevalent. The suffering servant, Jesus, knew it well. For this reason, the Psalms have for thousands of years been the cry of humanity, even among people who didn't know to whom they were pleading their case. Our lives are filled with brokenness, not only our occasional unmet expectations, but the reality that everything we set our minds and efforts toward is plagued by some power against our success and our joy. Nothing ever comes easy except the things that shouldn't. Hence the wisdom of Mr. Murphy. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. It's the assumption in the Apostle James' encouragement. James chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. My brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Life is laden with perpetual trouble. David knew this well. He knew equally that he had brought much of it on himself. but he saw a greater power working in the midst of life's chaotic curse. A power, in fact, triumphing in the midst of that curse, triumphing in protection and provision for the beloved. I'm going to come back to this in just a bit. Before I do, let's concern ourselves with the world's way of taking care when faced with this chaotic curse. Because as I said, it is a curse on the entire human race. Pastor Josh has been preaching the Psalms World Tour. I thought that was kind of a cool, fitting name. It's like a rock group out on, traveling across the nation. Today is the final track, if you will, on the CD. Wow, we don't even have CDs anymore. Now we have just digital music, right? It's the final track, and I'm just hoping this track won't get cut from the album. The song Pastor Josh chose as worldly contrast for today's track is Coolio's Gangstas Paradise. Now, I had just graduated from college as Coolio was becoming popular in the mid-1990s, and this track was a serious cut back then. As an LA rapper, Coolio spoke about life from his viewpoint as a gangster in LA County. Many neighborhoods in that urban jungle witnessed the barbaric, manipulative, short-lived life of street survival. Coolio and his compatriots shared in a culture of do it to them before they do it to you. Those who survived and or thrived by this philosophy gained an heroic, feared reputation. The spirits of fear and despotism ruled as insiders learned the skill of leveraging drugs, guns, sex, guerrilla warfare, and betrayal, creating what you would call a bestial commerce. Streets like those in which Coolio ran made tyrants of often innocent yet naturally self-indulgent, power-hungry people. But the few rewards of that guerrilla life lay only with the elite at the top of the heap, because on top, there was at least the illusion of esteem, of having it all. Yet even those on top had to keep one eye wide open for the rival or underling literally gunning for their position. Listen to how Coolio epitomizes this life in his song. And the only thing I'm regretting now is I don't have the song in the background so that I could say this, but here we go. As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left. Because I've been blasting and laughing so long that even my mama thinks my mind is gone. But I ain't never crossed a man that didn't deserve it. Me be treated like a punk, you know that's unheard of. You better watch how you talking and where you walking, or you and your homies might be lined in chalk. Look at the situation they got me facing. I can't live a normal life. I was raised by the street. So I gotta be down with the hood team. Too much television watching got me chasing dreams. I'm an educated fool with money on my mind. Got my 10 in my hand and a gleam in my eye. I'm a loked out gangster, set tripping banger. And my homies is down, so don't arouse my anger. Fool, death ain't nothing but a heartbeat away. I'm living life do or die, what can I say? I'm 23 now, but will I live to see 24? The way things is going, I don't know. That's why I said I wish I had the music in the background and my cap on sideways. Now maybe you don't understand half or most of what he's saying. Probably because there's a logic to the language, a meaning to the phrases that is very far from our normal conversations. But it's very apparent, even to us, that threats and death are normal for this poet. You better take advantage or kill the other guy before he does it to you, because he will if given the opportunity. Danger and betrayal are so normal that this young man may not even live to see the ripe old age of 24. He thinks he's got homies or trusted friends, but the life of most gangsters proves that the most trusted friends will stab you in the back or you'll get caught in the crossfire. Even his own mother thinks he's gone crazy from all the killing and drugs he's done. If there is a more poignant description of a despairing life, I don't know what it is. Coolio couldn't be more clear about the depravity by which he's surrounded. Did you notice the way that he began this rap? It was with that phrase from the 23rd Psalm, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Here's a young man living in a place where the chaotic curse is severely intensified, like David stuck in that cave running from Saul. Threats and destructive invitations come daily and present themselves around nearly every corner. Get yours while you can. Punk them or get punked. Kill or be killed. And who has your back when the stakes are that high? Well, no one, at least not for long. No guiding hand, no rescue, when the question at hand is this: who is taking care of you? That's when the world responds, nobody, it's on me. Your homies will stand with you in the street against their rivals, but they'll equally turn on you if the reward for them is great enough. In an interview some years later, Coolio said, the song is really about life. It's really about being controlled. You don't have control over your own life. The streets control you. The life of thuggery and hopelessness and fear controls you. What feels for a few moments to most gangsters like paradise is that world's false and fleeting hope. When Coolio rapped this song during the interview, his co-artist who sang on the song ended it with this sobering refrain. Tell me, why are we so blind to see that the ones we hurt are you and me? Ain't no gangstas living in paradise. In truth, this is normal for the world. Tribal warfare and self-preservation are common practice. You can put a suit on a guy and comb his hair, even give him a nice car, make him a softball coach, perhaps even put him in charge of a nation. There may be fewer overt violent traces, but the impulse remains. How does David's experience differ from this? In many ways, it seems more parallel than different. Read his life. Running with his homies, often acting violently, taking another brother's woman, usurped by his own family. Yet, though given a clear opportunity, he didn't cut the throat of King Saul. He didn't knock off the kingpin. Why? When he stole Uriah's wife and was confronted by the prophet Nathan, he didn't have Nathan killed for his truth-telling. Why? When his son Absalom ran him out of town and made sleeping with his concubines in public a nightly news segment, he didn't order Absalom tortured and killed. Why? There's no pretty, tidy, simplistic answer. It's messy, sometimes gruesome. It's a sordid tale. But the reason David acted as he did hinges on how he answered the question: who is overseeing my life? Who is taking care of me? The world answers, it's on me. Do it to them before they do it to you. Leverage whatever power you have. David answers, someone far greater has accompanied me on this journey, and he has made gracious provision for me. Psalm 23 is a moment of reflection, perhaps a rare one, a later in life reminiscence, during which David expresses the Holy One of Israel's generous and hopeful care for him. David's best analogies for God's care of him are that of a true shepherd and a gracious host. The good shepherd gave him courage to fight more than one giant, gifted him with harp-worthy songs, kept him from killing the king who threatened his life, planted courage deep, deep within him, corrected him through the Spirit-filled prophet Nathan, and brought him into the kingship of his nation. This is the God whom David understood to also be gracious as a host who fed him in the land of his enemies. He had to spend some time with the Philistines for safety. He anointed him through Samuel while Saul was yet king. He provided for he and his renegade band with nourishment through a very wise woman who was married to an idiot man. He gave him Jonathan, the best confidant a young man could ever have. He fed him and his men on the run with some special priestly bread, and he brought the nation peaceful union under David's leadership. The God behind all these activities moving through the life of this wild man. This untidy, even unstable life may sound harrowing to many of us, very disordered, but that may well be because we have become satisfied sometimes with a safe and sterile God, an inoffensive benefactor. If this is what we think of God or how we hope him to be, we may be treading very dangerous territory, because the God that we want to tame is the very God who considered wild David a man after his own heart. And here lies the great trap of which the world easily fills the space with false expectations. On the one hand, God's wild, sometimes uninhibited oversight suggests a license to us to live unrestrained, self-pleasing lives. Get all you can out of life for yourself. There's really no one paying attention. Look out for number one. Everyone else is doing the same thing. On the other hand, God's self-restraint and patience and compassion suggests a God asleep at the wheel. Shh, everyone just keep your head down. Keep quiet. Be safe and healthy and just try to get through with as little trouble as possible. Don't draw attention to yourself. David would have neither of these, because he has been cared for while living among enemies and tasted sweetly at an unwelcoming table. And the only explanation for this nonsense is the good intention and powerful hand of God who walked with him through his life. See, David orchestrated none of this. It was God who orchestrated it. In the later part of his life, in the spirit of this very psalm, David did another wild thing. He brought a young man named Mephibosheth into his home. At that time, the family of Saul was considered David's enemies, but David had made an earlier promise to Jonathan to care for his family. And David discovered that this crippled man, Mephibosheth, was the son of his beloved friend, though equally the grandson of his mortal enemy. It was no doubt his realization of God's shepherding hand and hosting kindness that moved him to keep his promise. Let me read to you from 2 Samuel chapter 9. So King David had him, Mephibosheth, brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth, at your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in their crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. The man who was graciously protected and provided for David became a gracious and protecting provider. He kept his promises. He owned his sin. He sought peace for his people. Just a few days ago, a stalwart group of adult black men in Detroit, known as the Detroit 300, stood up in a community forum to assertively declare that they are no longer standing by watching their nieces, nephews, cousins, sons, and daughters die on their streets. Streets that, often under the false guise of anti-racism, suffer the tyranny of the strong who prey on the weak and defenseless. For their alleged victims are often the wolves in sheep's clothing, the real offenders. Rather, these men have declared that they will not, even if they share a skin color, make any kind of negotiations or agreements with those who will kill their children or take advantage of them if given the chance. They will not abide streets of terror down which kids have to run home rather than ride a bike or skip and eat ice cream. They will not abide the impulsive indulgence to threaten and maim. They will not abide a culture of death. They will rise against it to provide their children, families, and community a peaceful, hopeful, life-giving reality. They have prepared, and they are prepared, whatever it may cost them. These men are responding, like David, to that imperative question: who is taking care? Their answer is, we are. They have no intention of making a truce with the likes of Coolio and his tribe. They intend to be much more like David's berry band of renegade justice seekers. God willing, they will prevail, and their children and neighbors will live peacefully under the care of good shepherds and in generosity of gracious hosts. Amen.